Great.
This is Late Night Health. I'm Mark Alyn. We are broadcasting live from Supply Side West in Las Vegas, Nevada. Late Night Health is powered by Pod Clips. It's a brand new podcasting network that we'll talk about in the next few weeks. We have a great guest. We're going to be talking about a small country, and actually, we're going to be talking about an herb. That's called Ashwagandha. Ashwagandha. I've actually tried it, and we'll talk about my experience with it, my wife's experience with it as well. Our guest is Chris Kilham. He is the medicine hunter. Chris, welcome to Late Night Health.
Thanks so much for having me on, Mark. I appreciate it.
Let's talk about the medicine hunter. You've been doing this for how many years?
Well, I've been traveling the world investigating natural botanicals in different countries and working on chain of trade for about the last 25 years, full-time. Prior to that, somewhat part-time, but I've been involved in the natural products industry for, now it's about a little over 40 years.
I just remembered where we met.
Where's that?
Expo West.
Okay.
David Foreman.
Okay.
Got it. Dr. David. In your travels and looking for new products, what has come across your travels recently before we get into ashwagandha?
Well, recently, I go after different projects in different parts of the world. And ideally, I go back to them. So I don't like to do a project just once. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've done many of those, but I prefer to go back to places again and again and again.
So a restaurant critic doesn't go in once and writes about it? You go back several times?
Well, I go back several times to build relationships, to see how the chain of trade is going, to see if people are thriving more than they were when we started working together, whatever might be the case. In terms of new recent discoveries, new recent botanical discoveries, I've made none. But in terms of new discoveries, in terms of my own knowledge, I've recently completed 2 tea projects in China. One in Sichuan, in the mountains there, and one in Hunan.
Are those spicy teas?
No, they're not. They're not spicy teas. They're regular tea, green tea. But in both instances, I was unaware of the projects that I went to previously. And in the case of Sichuan, I saw a project that had actually been set up by the Chinese government that took a huge forested area and then in just small sections of it here and there, 8 acres here, 10 acres, 13 acres here, they had tea gardens, beautiful, beautiful tea plantations. And otherwise, it was surrounded by forest and wildlife. So rather than, let's say, an entire area that would just be nothing but tea, this was really much more environmentally friendly. At one point, somebody came through with a whole herd of goats.
Oh my!
And they busily ate the weeds, didn't touch the tea, and so that was fascinating to me, and
And green tea is a great natural product because of the polyphenols.
It is a great natural product. It shows benefits for reducing risk of different forms of cancer. It's very good for the cardiovascular system, enhances energy with or without caffeine, interestingly enough. Sharpens mental focus, has other protective properties. So often it's not necessarily the botanical itself that's new for me. It'll be the source. I found a source of tea in Hunan recently that was not in a similar mountain situation, but in a hilly region, spectacular. And I wound up going to a mountain there where I met with researchers who had done some of the some of the discovery on some novel tea strains that were found from antiquity that are extremely concentrated in the polyphenols.
Oh, wow.
And highly valuable and relatively easy to grow. So often it's discoveries that I really don't expect. I was not at all expecting to learn about this novel strain of tea that they'd found on this particular mountain. So it can really depend. It may be a new botanical, but often it's a new source.
Let's talk about ashwagandha. I've used it for relaxation.
Yes.
But there are other properties to it. Tell us what it is. You just told somebody you've been a fan of it since 1972 or 3.
Yeah, I first got interested in the Indian system of health, of Ayurveda, in right around 1972. And I bought one of the primary old texts of Ayurveda, this almost inscrutable, humongous volume called the Charaka Samhita. And I was reading about ashwagandha in it, and it just sounded kind of heroic, like something I would want. And very shortly thereafter, an Ayurvedic physician who'd written a few books came to Boston, which is right near where I was living. So I went to see him, and he wound up giving me some ashwagandha pills, some kind of crude little pills to take. And I enjoyed the experience, eventually ran out, didn't know where to get that any further. But then that sort of directed some of my subsequent many trips to India, investigating ashwagandha in different places. Ashwagandha is a root. Its botanical name is somnifera. And pertinent to what you were saying about relaxation, somnifera means sleep-inducing. And what's curious about ashwagandha is it will not make you sleepy. It will not make you tired. But when you lie down to go to sleep, you'll go to sleep.
Absolutely.
And at the same time, ashwagandha imparts energy, endurance, stamina, increased strength, actual physical muscular strength, significantly lowers stress by lowering cortisol in the blood as much as about 28%.
Would that also help reduce tummy fat?
Yes, it does. When you have lower cortisol, then you tend toward a more favorable lean muscle to fat ratio. Also, it'll help to keep skin a little bit more youthful longer. Obviously helps with some aspects of sexual function, certainly arousal. So this is it's a big thing. It's a big thing. Ashwagandha, in the Ayurvedic tradition, you may know this, there are about 7,500 herbs that are used in all of Ayurveda. The top one.
I did not realize
the number
that Ayurvedic had that many.
Yeah, well, this is the number one.
Wow.
In Ayurveda, they call this the king of herbs. And they do so because its activity is so broad. It's very good for cognitive enhancement, so sharpening the mind. It's very good for helping you to work mentally longer. It's very good for physical strength, endurance, stamina, sports performance, all of that. Sexual and reproductive health and function. So it's one of the great treasures. And here at this show, I do some advising to and education on behalf of an ashwagandha extract called KSM 66.
And that's made by?
It's made by a company called Ixorial from India.
Ixorial Biomed.
Yeah, and they started about 7 years ago. And what they have done, and you see this occasionally in our industry, a company will work with one ingredient, like Lyco Red, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Lyco Red's what they do. They're a one-ingredient entity. Or some theanine, something like that. KSM 66 is utterly and completely devoted to ashwagandha. So they have certified organic cultivation in the fields in Rajasthan, India, about 1,600 acres worth of ashwagandha.
Oh, my.
They have exceptional clean green extraction in Hyderabad, India. And they've sponsored a number of double-blind, placebo-controlled human clinical studies. So we're talking 14 that have been published in peer-reviewed journals, 4 that are currently under review, I think 3 that are in process, and a 1,000-person multi-center study that we should have the data from within a few months.
Which will show what ashwagandha actually does.
Yeah, I mean, all these studies...
scientifically.
Yes, all these studies have done that. And the traditional uses of ashwagandha are many. And it's worth noting that this has been used for about 4,000 years that we know of among hundreds of millions of people. It has a tremendous safety record. There are no known adverse effects to taking ashwagandha. And in the human clinical studies, we see affirmation of the traditional uses. I never say validation, okay? These things are valid to start with. Corroboration, okay. Validation, no. This stuff was validated. This was valid thousands of years ago.
That's an interesting thing. So ashwagandha has a history. And
4,000 years.
4,000 years. I mean, there are other products that have been used for variety, headaches and stopping bleeding when you're cut.
Right,
all these other things
right.
that have been used for thousands of years. But today, scientists are saying that's only anecdotal.
Well, scientists say that. Only scientists who are imperious and up themselves and don't know what the hell they're doing in the world say that. Because that's absolute nonsense. That's crap. If you can't sleep, and I give you ashwagandha, and it's the one thing you change in your lifestyle, and you start getting a good night's sleep, and you go, hey, is this stuff supposed to, make me feel less stressed? And by the way, I've got more natural, spontaneous erections. Is that supposed to happen too? Yes. And all of that is traditional use. You don't need a double-blind, placebo-controlled human clinical study to tell you that when you step into a shower, you get wet. You don't need a study.
I'm not sure.
You don't need a study to tell you you're feeling more energy, or that you're feeling happier, or that your digestion's working better. The studies are great, they're valuable, they're essential to attract the clinical community, and these days people want the reassurance of good scientific studies. So I don't diss them at all. But we already knew this was effective. We already knew that.
And the corporate company, and KSM 66 is a primary sponsor. I think it's the
show sponsor.
The show sponsor.
Yep.
And has been the last couple of years, right, Dean?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, what's peculiar about them is that this, while it is not a non-profit company, that is, it's not set up as a non-profit entity, they don't have to be profitable. They just have to not lose money. They're actually part of a much bigger group of corporate entities in India called the Baldwa Group, which is all owned by one family. Trucking, jewelry manufacturing, energy generation, some big industries. And they determined about 15 years ago or so that they really wanted to develop a business whose sole function would be to serve people.
Wow.
And they had the dough to do it. So they started working on developing what they hoped would be the best ashwagandha extract they possibly could. It took 14 years, and the reason this is called KSM 66 is that this is the 66th iteration of an extraction method that they tried. It could easily have been KSM 31 or KSM 129. It happens to be KSM 66 because it took that many tries to get something that would guarantee the particular potency they want, the way they wanted it. And so in terms of the what we know to be primary active compounds in the root, a group called the withanolides, this extract has the greatest concentration of withanolides of any extract made from just pure root.
With our fast-paced, fast food society today, everybody should be taking this stuff.
Well, yeah, that's kind of the whole point. And what's interesting, because you could ask, okay, if this stuff has been around for 4,000 years, why wasn't this a hit in our industry in the 70s? Very simple reason. It had no advocacy. I've helped, for example, with bringing to market kava and maca. Those are two kind of signature plants I'm especially known for. Both long.
And both regard in the same area of helping induce sleep and relaxing people.
Well, kava certainly. Maca is much more energizing and nutritious. But the point is that I was fortunate to work with companies who had the means to really promote and advocate for these and help to develop them into market successes. What KSM 66 has done is taken something that has been vastly popular in India, vastly popular among Indians living in other parts of the world, and has finally given it the gasoline, the engine, the promotional engine that it needs to be a success here, which is why we saw last year Ashwagandha went from not being particularly high at all in the bestseller list in natural chains to number 6.
Wow.
Everybody got banged down one peg this year as a result of CBD leaping to number 1. So now currently in the natural chain, Ashwagandha's number 7. But that's a huge leap forward. And that really speaks to, if you can apply consistent energy and consistent education and consistent science and just keep moving that forward the way Schwab has done that with ginkgo, the way Kira did that with St. John's wort, the way NatureX did that with kava, and on and on and on. If you can really get that muscle, you can bring something to prominence in the market that's genuinely beneficial to people.
How do people get it? Now, we're at a show where many of the products that we've been talking about are not available directly to the consumer, but are ingredients in other products.
Well, this is an ingredient show. Yeah, right. And so just like you don't know who makes the glass for your windshield in your car.
Nor do I care.
Right. Okay. Well, that may be so.
Yes.
But it could be it could be Corning. It could be somebody else.
Right.
But we don't know. I don't know who made it in my Volvo. I have no idea. All I know is that, fortunately, when I drive at high speed in a strong wind, it doesn't flop in my face. That's what I care about. Most people who are the end users are not necessarily aware of ingredients, but then we see companies like Intel Inside. To look for Intel Inside, for example. We've been trained to do that.
Correct.
We right now we have about 680 products in the market today that use KSM 66 ashwagandha. Many of them put it on the front label. All of them put it on the ingredient panel. So if you were to Google KSM 66 products, you'd get Jarrow, you'd get Solgar, you'd get all the Garden of Life, you get these different ones. And then what you'd want to look for is, okay, who's doing this in a daily dose of 600 milligrams, because that's the amount that's been used in every human clinical study sponsored by KSM 66. So how people can get it is by looking for KSM 66 if they're going into a store, if they're buying online, looking for that. And, maybe you don't get it from Eddie's Botanicals in Skokie. Maybe you get it from a big company you can trust.
Got it. And you can actually Google, as you said, KSM 66,
yes,
which will give you some products that have that. 600 milligram
The 600 milligram dose is what has been used in every human clinical study with KSM 66, except for one study, I forget which one it was, that used 675 milligrams. And why that? I have no idea, Mark.
Chris, thank you for spending some time with us.
It's my great pleasure.
And look forward to talking to you again. You're welcome back to Late Night Health when we're back in the studio anytime. Chris Kilham, the Medicine Hunter. It's medicinehunter.com. And if you want information about KSM66, just Google it. That's the easiest way.
You can go to the website and you can read the infographics of the studies, which are really simple, non-technical, give you super valuable information. It's kind of a fascinating read.
And where do you do that?
KSM66.com. Yep.
Oh, okay. That's even better. KSM.
Even better.
Even better. Even easier for somebody like me.
And thank you for what you're doing, educating people about health and really spreading the word. It's an important and valuable service.
Well, I appreciate that. We believe that people have the right to choose the kind of health care they want and that they are in charge of their own health care.
Outrageous.
Oh, isn't that?
Blasphemy.
I know. Insurance companies really aren't overly happy with me.
Good thing.
Yeah, it's true. But
that's a badge of honor, man.
Hey, what are you going to do? Thank you, those little black-hearted bastards in Woodland Hills with the blue on their label. And I am insured by them. And they're the reasons I started this show. That's another story for another time. We're going to start the music again. And as we start the music again, we know that this segment is ended. It's been fascinating. Chris will be back with us. I know we have mutual friends. I remembered one when we met. We met a couple of months ago. Dean, thank you very much for bringing Chris over. I'm Mark Alyn for Late Night Health. Late Night Health is powered by Pod Clips, and we thank Mike Anderson for putting that together. Pod Clips coming up in the next few weeks. We'll be back. We have more live from Las Vegas and Supply Side West. Don't go away. More happy.